Hey guys, Geordie from Vhedia here, just showing you how to do a generic install for a Toyota Surf 1995. Though we do plug and play normally, for this vehicle we were unable to use the factory plugs due to it not having any. So let's have a look what we got. Most importantly, we have our installation hydration assistant, very important there. We've got our 4G antenna, GPS antenna, your little Bluetooth Wi-Fi antenna, your USB retention cables. This is the only harness that will be using for our install, and a couple of tools as well as soldering. As I said guys, usually our units are with plug and play, but for this we do not have the option. And then we've got our unit there as well as our reverse camera. Cool, so let's get into it.
Hey guys, so you're going to need a couple of things for this install, just a couple of basic tools. Some things you won't necessarily need, but will make your life a lot easier. First things first, you're definitely going to need is a soldering iron to solder in your wires, and then you're going to need a test light or a multimeter. So the test light will suffice, you don't necessarily need a multimeter. This will just make life a little bit easier, but it doesn't really matter. Obviously solder, so you can solder your joins. In the kit will come with your trim tools, but with these older vehicles you might not necessarily need these because a lot of it's all screwed in your old 90s cars had previous head units and stuff. For mostly Toyota you would need an 8, a 10 and a 12mm socket with a ratchet, and even better if you can get it on a gun, so just undo the screws a bit quicker, but ratchet will suffice. Some side cutters, a screwdriver, Phillips head, wire strippers. You need a blowtorch to shrink your heat shrink, some electrical tape, which you probably won't need because what we're going to do is we're actually going to heat shrink every single join, and then you'll probably want a couple of lengths of different heat shrink salt after you solder it all together, and then a couple of cable ties just for cable management. Okay guys, just a little add-on here. Your unit might come with some extra cables. As we said earlier, you probably won't need, and it will come with OBD2 plugins. So this vehicle is OBD1. We've still got to test that, and we're going to see if that works, but we need an adapter for it. But yes, this won't work with cars of this age, so you won't need them either. So that will just go on this pile here. All right guys, first step with any electrical install is you want to disconnect your battery. You've just got to disconnect your negatives. So you just either need a 10 or a 13. We'll just push it off to the side. Just like that. And if you have a dual battery system, you want to make sure you do your second battery as well, just to be safe. Alright guys, so we're in the car now, we're ready to install. First thing you're probably going to want to do is give yourself plenty of room in here. So make sure your handbrake is on tight. You'll probably want to move your shifter all the way back. Sometimes they have a lock button down here. Press that, pull it all the way back, make sure the car doesn't move anywhere, and you've got plenty of room to get in here. So over to the left here, we've already removed the glove box. It's pretty simple, it's just a couple of screws. Just got one up here, one down there, one up here, and one down here. And it will come out with the speaker cover with it. Alright guys, the next step is to remove this little center console pocket. So there's two clips, one on either side. It'll be like a plastic clip you just put a flathead screwdriver into and pop it out. And then you just pretty much grab it like this and it will pull straight back and pop out and pull out like that. And give you access to your bottom area. Next part to come out is this under the steering column bit trim. So you've got a screw here, 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 and here. And then once all them come out, you're able to just pull, and it should just come down out of the way. So it might not completely come off. You might have your bonnet popper and your fuel popper still attached, but that's as far as we need to take it off, and I can just sit down like that. So the next part to come out is this aircon surround bit. Now it is very fragile on these old girl Toyotas, so just be a bit gentle with that part. You almost might already be broken if someone's already had a go at the stereo. You can just super glue it back together, pop it back in, or maybe able to find some secondhand one online, but just be gentle. If yours is in good nick, just take care when removing it. Now that aircon control surround bits are out, be able to grab this center bit and just pull it towards you. It should come out in all in one piece. It might take a little bit of persuading, but it shouldn't break. It's pretty tough. Just something I forgot to mention earlier, we've already removed our ashtray from this. So you probably want to remove that. And there is a light at the top that you need to fully unplug from the ashtray, which ours is already removed because we don't actually have the ashtray installed. And then you will need to unplug this plug here, which is going to your cigarette lighter. So after you've unplugged that plug, the whole bottom part just lift out and put that off to the side. Next part is removing the old head unit itself. So you'll have 4 screws around the outside to remove it. 4 Phillips head screws. With these old cars, I highly doubt you'd still have your tape deck from 1995. If it's one of these aftermarket double DIN units, it would just be the 4 screws, and it just pops out. Now those 4 screws are removed, you'll be able to grab the unit and it should just pull out. Just be careful to make sure no wires get caught or anything. Now in this old head unit, we've got our antenna, which will just pull out. We will need that for the new head unit. We have a mic, but we probably won't be using this because it has an internal microphone in the new unit. Just unplug your wires here for the old unit, come out like that, and a USB, which we'll be using a new one anyway as well. So here we have what I like to call the spaghetti monster, which is quite common in your old cars that have had many different head units. We will go through all these wires and explain how we need to hook up the new head unit's wiring to them, one by one in a way, and we'll go from there. Right, so you've got the new head unit wiring. We're not going to need this plug because we are going to hardwire it and solder it all in. So what you need to do is grab your side cutters and you're going to chop off every wire. Make sure to cut as close to the original plug as possible. Pause. Alright, now we've come to the point where we're going to prep the head unit wiring to go onto our spaghetti monster. So this plug here is for the genuine plug-in and play, but we're fitting to obviously an aftermarket previous install. That's an absolute mess. So what you're going to have to do is remove this plug by cutting each one of these wires off, because you're going to need to solder straight onto them, which is quite simple to do. Make sure you give yourself plenty of length, so when you come to soldering, it just makes life a lot easier. Okay, I'm gonna go through and explain the wires for the new head unit and how we'll be wiring them into the car. So I'm just gonna explain each wire, what they're for. So black is quite obvious. This is your earth, so you just need to run that to the body or to the shaft, like the body somewhere, and to the metal. Yellow is your constant power, which I'll show you how to find. Orange is your dim, so when you flick your lights on, it makes the screen go more dim so you can see it, so it's not blinding you at night. Blue is an accessories, so this is, or auxiliary, so this is for either your amp trigger or something else you want to turn on when the head unit turns on. And then red is your ignition switch, which will turn on when you turn on your ignition, making your radio turn on. Now the rest of these wires off to the side here, all these colourful wires here, they're all for your speakers, and I'll show you how to work that out. So if you're lucky enough, you will have on the previous unit colours that already match up for your speakers and also for your power supply and everything. But if you don't, I'll show you a trick on how to work out each speaker and work out where all your triggers and your powers are. Alright, so now we're going to explain how to find the actual wires for your triggers. So your power, your ignition, and your dim. So the first one, which you'll have to be careful for, so make sure no wires are touching any other wires when you do this, and go and reconnect your battery, and then with your test light, or you could even use a multimeter, find which wire has your constant power with the ignition off. So it should be a general thick wire, most likely yellow, but if, as you can see, this is tapping into genuine wiring, so it could be any one of these, but you can just probe the genuine plug if it's still got it, or just go along each wire and find your constant power. The next wire you will need is your ignition. So to find ignition, you just flick it on your ignition, and with your test light you'll go along and find it, and if it lights up, and then when you turn ignition off and it turns off, that's your ignition. And the last wire is your dim, which we've already found. Yeah. So as you go along testing your wires, but switch your dim on, so you have your dash lights on, and go along and test each wire until it comes on. Obviously it's not going to be the other two because they're already having power, so you know they're not it. As you can see, the lighting up, can't really hold it there at the same time, but with dim off, it's off. Now you've worked out what all your powers are, just make sure you're going to re-disconnect the battery, because if this touches to earth, it will blow a fuse, probably worst case, but you just don't want to damage anything else. So now you've worked that out, go disconnect battery. Next step is your speaker wiring. So we're kind of a bit lucky here that we already have colors matching up for speakers, but the trick to working out your speaker wiring is you would probably want to just cut it after you've worked out all your powers and everything. Majority of the time the rest will just be speaker wiring. To work out which one's for which speaker, grab yourself a AA battery, and you can go along, so you start with say one wire and go along and test them all on until you'll hear the speaker I don't know if you can hear that, but you can hear fuzzing in the background from that particular speaker, and that way you know they're the 2 wires for that particular speaker. If it is the genuine wiring, as you can see back here, because ours has had new cable ran, but at the back here, when you find the 2 wires, they'll generally be just 2 of the same color, but one will have a black trace on it. Now that is your negative. So as with the new unit, you will see you got your 2 colors. For example, with your green here, you have one that is full green, so that is your positive, and then the green with the black on it is your negative. So you want to make sure you wire them up right so your speakers sound right. So with genuine speaker wiring, unlike what I said before, they might not actually have a black trace, but if you are wiring straight into genuine speaker wiring, you can do the AA battery trick and work out which wires are for which batteries. But probably the best way to go about it is to go online and Google for your car's stereo wiring, and you should be able to find a pinout and a color coding wiring diagram to work out what all your left, right, rear, left and right speakers outputs are. Alright, so next step is to prep all your wiring to get ready to join them and solder them. So the first step is to strip all your wires. So you just pretty much put it in your wire stripper and just squeeze it. So your length, you want a decent length, probably about 20 mil long, but yay. So you've got plenty to join the 2 wires together and plenty of wire for the solder to soak into. So you're going to go along and strip every single wire with about a 20 mil length and go from there. So now we've stripped the head unit side, and we're going to strip the car side after working out which speakers wires are which and power wires and all that. Alright, so your next step is you're going to want to put heat shrink on to each wire. Make sure you do this before you solder, because you'll solder them together and you'll be kicking yourself after if you don't. Can't say how many times I've done that. So each of our joins is going to be about 20 mil long, so you probably want a bit of heat shrink about 25 mil long, 30 mil long, just so it covers that entire joint. So you need to go along and just cut like a length, so I'll say yay long, and then I just use that as my measuring point and go along and cut. Keep cutting lengths like that. So with heat shrink, you can get it at pretty much any auto store. It comes in all different lengths and sizes. So yeah, just making sure we're definitely putting our our heat shrink on each one of our wires. So just slip it over the top and then slide it all the way down and as far away from the joint as possible, and go along and do each one you're going to solder. Just make sure it's far enough away so when you do solder, it doesn't shrink it up on the wire and then you can't move it back to actually where the joint is after it's cooled down. Okay, so we've got all our heat shrink on all our wires that we're going to solder. So we will need to go and plug in our soldering iron, or unless you've got a gas one, which will probably be a lot more convenient, but you can just go plug it in, let it heat up, bring it back to the car and do however many you can solder in the time before it cools down, or just do one at a time. I'll show you how I'll join them, and then you solder it, go plug it back in, join the next one, solder it, and take your time with it. I'll go and plug in the soldering iron, let it heat up, I'll join up the main power I'll start with, and I'll show you how I'll solder it and join it all together. So now on to our next step, which is soldering them. You want to grab the 2 wires that you obviously want to join. You want to try and keep the solder not too big. The way I do it, everyone's got their special way and preferred way of soldering, but it's quite simple and straightforward. Once you've done it once or twice, it's easy. I just cross the wires slightly like that and then wrap them around each other. And then get it nice and tight as you wrap it. So now that's ready to solder. Alright, so now your soldering iron's all nice and hot. You want to make sure you're not going to contact any other wires and have that wire out of the way and ready. Bring your soldering iron to it, let it heat up for a little bit, and the heat will soak into the actual wiring itself. And then start with the solder on the actual soldering iron and then push it into the join. And you'll see it will slowly soak into the wires, and then remove it, and that's it. And then you have yourself a nice, as it cools down, it will just go hard, and then you have a nice solid solder joint. And then the last step of joining the wire is you just need you could just use a cheap beak lighter, or a jet lighter will just do it just as quick. You want to grab your heat shrink on that wire and slide it up over the top of your solder joint so it covers it nicely. Lighter going, and then just keep a bit of distance so it doesn't burn it. Keep moving and you'll see it shrink. Squish it on a little bit, and there you go, nice solid solder joint. Alright, Now you've soldered and joined and heat shrunk all your joins and you're all ready to start testing. I've also gone the extra mile and soldered in the trigger wire for our reverse camera. So since you're doing all the other lot, you may as well just grab your wiring harness, which is for your reverse camera. If you refer to our reverse camera video wiring, this is the one that picks up off the back of the head unit. So you can, instead of using a Scotch lock or something, it's probably best to just solder that in. Now it's all soldered up and hooked up, it's probably good to do a test of the head unit before putting it all back together. So you just grab your head unit. It'll be a bit tricky to show. It goes into the one with the fuse. Just go boop, like that. It should click and it clicks in. We'll also plug in our reverse camera and give that a test as well. While last thing we want is to put it all together and it's work together and not working. So plug that in as well. All plugged in, make sure they're all squeezed in. So the reverse camera goes in the bottom right, and we'll go through all your GPS and 4G plugs and all the other good stuff as well in a moment. But we just want to test the head unit itself. So now it's all plugged in, it should be all ready to go. So you should be able to just grab your key and turn on your ignition. And if you give it a moment, she should fire up just like that. So just like testing the head unit, you probably want to test your reverse camera as well. So with that all plugged in and soldered up, I just have the wiring temporarily just running out of the car here with the camera. And as you come into the engine bay, we have our red and black disc, so this will pick up on reverse at the rear of the vehicle. But I'm just going to do a quick test to make sure it's all hooks up and works fine. So you can just touch on your negative and on your positive, and you can see the camera just sitting there. And then if you go inside the car, you'll see that it should have turned on. So now we're all happy, everything's working. We can shut the unit down and we're gonna unplug it again so we can run our wiring and get it all nice and neat and tidy. I might remove the key to stop the clicking. So we'll unplug everything from here, just for now. Unplugged. And just set the head unit aside for now. So now, what we're going to do is mount up all this good stuff for our head unit. Our GPS antenna for our Waze and Google Maps and all that. Our 4G for when we put a SIM card in. So we got a SIM card dongle, so you don't even need your phone, just hook straight up. So we'll go on to mounting all these at the back here, in here, and get them ready to be plugged in. And then we can run the wiring up and get it all ready to plug in, make it all nice and neat and tidy. Then we can plug it all in and start putting it all back together. Depending on the vehicle and the head unit, you might need to reuse the old brackets and mount them onto the new head unit. So it's in this case, it's just 3 screws on either side just to take the brackets off, and then we'll mount them onto the new head unit so we can mount it into the dash. So now we are ready to install the unit after mounting everything up. I'll go through all that as well. So we have mounted at the back here our 4G antenna. All right, so now we have everything soldered up, mounted in, all the cables all tidied up. You would also want to go through it and mount your 4G antenna. I have, so at the back here, it just has to go onto plastic or like a windscreen or something. It can't go on metal. And the same again with the GPS antenna, which I've mounted at the back here onto a plastic. This is like the air box for your aircon. So that's something perfect you can mount onto. And then you want to run all your wires out so you have access to them. Ran out, so we have our... Also you want to run your USB. So I'm going to run this down and out so we have access to them for updates, as well as our phone, so you can do Android Auto and CarPlay and all that. And you want to make sure that your camera wiring is ran. You have your antenna still from the previous head unit ready to go, and that's it. And then we'll go along and plug each one of these into the back of the head unit and mount the head unit, push it into the dash, and then we'll give it another test run, and then we can go ahead and put it all back together. So the first thing we're going to start with plugging in is our 4G SIM card plug. So it's just this little 6-pin plug here, and that's the unit, so that's what your SIM card will go into. Probably want to mount that somewhere accessible. We're not putting the SIM card in straight away, so we're going to put it somewhere so you can get to it, so when you have your SIM card you can easily get to it. So we're just going to have it dangled down the back here so it's accessible when we pull that trim off. So this one goes into this top second from the right, Alright, now you've plugged that in. They should go in nice and easy, and they'll all match up. So they only go in their own certain plug. So you can't really mess this up in any way. So the next one I'm going to plug in is my reverse camera. In like that. Make sure it's clicked in all the way. And then next one will be my GPS. Make sure, probably be gentle with these because they look like coax. So just be careful. And it should just slide straight over the top. And then I'm going to take a little bit of a push. Yep. And click. Yep. And that'll click on. And the same again with the 4G antenna. Just make sure to be careful. Make sure it's perfectly lined up. It goes on and clicks. Make sure it's nice and snug. And we've got our USB. Goes in here. Clicks in like that. Grab your antenna as well, which will go just same as the normal old antenna. Go straight in there. And then you should be able to lift up your unit, ready for the main plug. Run that over. Make sure it's clicked in all the way. Lift our unit up and in. Just want to make sure all our USB cables are all dangling down and not in the way as we lift it in. And there you have it, your unit is sitting in. So we'll go along and replace those 4 screws from that previous head unit and then give it a test run. Now you've got it all back together. Give it a test run, all screwed in. Comes straight back on. It's good. All the apps are working. Also check that when you turn on your headlights, the lights light up. So it goes into dim mode, so it's not so bright and you can see all your home button and everything. And that's it. Now you can put all your trim back together and the surrounds, pretty much everything that you took off just in reverse. Just make sure you put all your screws back, otherwise you end up with rattles or leftover screws and you don't want that. And that's pretty much it. So now we want to put in your center bit, but just don't forget any sort of plugs that you undid in the original removal. Just make sure you plug them back in. So we plug our cigarette lighter back in, but we won't really need it because now we can charge our phones through our new fancy head unit. And then you just want to make sure it's all lined up and you lift it back in. So now you want to put your center trim back in, so make sure it's all nice, neatly lined up, and then you should just click back in like so. Should nicely fit right around the head unit like so. So once you got that on, you want to put your under your column trim back in, and then you can go along and put all your screws back in. Alright guys, following up from where we left off last time, you're running the wire for your reverse camera, so you would have your wiring, as I explained earlier, running out from your center console out into your glove box area, and you want to run it along and cable tie it onto some wiring and to make it nice and neat. And then you're going to run it down your A pillar, which is the front pillar here, and then if you have trim along here, you want to undo some screws or clips. There could be clips or underneath that you might have to pry out depending on your vehicle. So you run underneath there, underneath the carpet, and then in the B pillar you might need to just, once this trim's removed, you should be able to pull the carpet away and tuck it just in there, or even just lift this trim up a bit depending on the vehicle, but you should be able to just tuck it underneath the carpet and then run underneath. Make sure to go on the outside of the seatbelt bracket so you doesn't get stuck on the inside of it, obviously. And then run to the back door and you run the wire through here, same as the front. And then when you come to here, another bit of trim you might have to remove. Quite simple to remove trims of cars this age, but most cars will be all the same. It literally just pops off. You just pull up and it should pop off, but every car is different, so depending on your vehicle, you might need to play around with it. But then you run your wire along here and then into your rear trim up in there, and then you'll come to the tail. Back. So I've already ran the wiring all through here behind the speaker and along here, and then you'll come to here and you will have to look for a grommet or an exit point underneath the vehicle that you can run the wiring to. So ours is down under here, all the way under. Might get really low. So I found a point just up in there, just there. And I've come out of there and I've ran along with the tailgate wiring and then ran up and I've joined in here. So I've ran it up this conduit into the tailgate, but here I've hooked into the reverse wiring. So you need to test light like this, so you can hook up to an earth point, bolt, or even your latch, and then you probe the other end into the wire. You can also use a razor blade. So if you use a razor blade, you can cut into the side of the wire with the razor blade and then put the test light on it, and it should light up once you've put it in reverse. So you need to get into the vehicle, put it in reverse, and then once you find a power source, test it and go up, take it out of reverse. The power should go away, and you just test it a couple times to make sure you definitely got your reverse pickup. The other wire, which is your video wire, you will need to run to wherever you're wanting to mount your camera. We have mounted our camera inside the tailgate, just above the number plate here. Now on this vehicle, it was quite tricky because there is a window inside the tailgate, but if you're just using it on a normal tailgate or even on just a normal back door, you should be able to just pull off the back trim and you will get access in there, and it should be easy to run. And then 2 screws just underneath it to mount it. And then there's the power wire, which is your red, and then yellow, which is your video. And then you just got to join in your reverse and earth, which I have done here. And that's your trigger to make it actually switch on. And that's pretty much it. Just a follow-up from the picking up the reverse, your reverse lights might be in your actual tail light itself instead of ours were in the actual tailgate, which is not very common. So all you have to do is, if they are in your reverse, there's normally 2 screws in like a tray back or even a station wagon. You undo them and the whole light pop out. Now be very careful because there'll probably be clips. It might pull backwards, or it might need tapping outwards. Just be very gentle. You might need to look online and see which way your tail light actually pops out, so it's not to break those clips. But it should come out with a firm pull, but don't just completely just yank it out. And then it's pretty much the same process, so it'll be a lot easier to figure out which one's your reverse, because it's just the clear light, which like clear lights like that, and you just pretty much tap in with your negative and your positive straight onto the back of where your reverse light globe actually goes in. So they'll have 2 wires there. You better pick up on them too as well, instead of having to tap in like that one there. And that should be it. Alright, so now you've wired it all up and it's time to test it. Probably good to do a test before putting all your trims and everything back and making sure your wiring joins are all good. So you want to make sure it's definitely working before you do the finishing up touches. But yep, you should be able to just bang it into reverse and it'll pop up, and there's our puppy Josie, as you can see, which is handy so you don't run over your dog. And that's pretty much it.